You know, sometimes a single moment you never planned for reshapes the entire rhythm of your life, and long after it passes, you can still feel the echo of it in the quietest corners of your memory, almost as if some part of you has been waiting for that moment to arrive. But that is exactly how it was on that late Thursday evening, when the office had emptied out and the fluorescent lights hummed like tired companions. And I found myself lingering at my desk, pretending to finish a report, even though my mind was wandering somewhere between duty and exhaustion. Richard, my boss for 7 years, steady, composed, with sleeves always rolled, as if he carried the world with him, was still in his office. The last person I expected to notice my presence, until the soft creak of his door broke the silence, and he leaned against the frame, with a quiet, almost weary look in his eyes, as he asked why I was still there. When I told him I didn't want to leave anything unfinished, he stepped inside with a faint smile, saying that was why he trusted me with everything. Though the tone of his voice held something heavier, something that made the room feel smaller and more intimate than it had moments earlier. The clock read past 8. The city outside melting into golden dusk behind the tall windows, and when he took a slow step closer and spoke about how long I'd been with the company, how much I had witnessed change, I felt something shift, not dramatic, but profound in a way that made the silence between us feel alive. Then, almost hesitantly, he closed the office door, and the soft click echoed through me in a way I couldn't explain. When he spoke again, calling me Claire in a low, softened voice, it felt strangely personal, as if he was pulling back a curtain he'd kept closed for years, confessing that he'd been distant not just from work, but from life, and that the simple question I'd asked him the week before, "Are you okay?" had stayed with him because no one ever asked him things like that. As he leaned against the desk near me, close enough for me to see the years etched gently around his eyes, it struck me how human he looked in that moment, stripped of titles and expectations, just a man who had carried silence for too long. He spoke about choices and time slipping away, and I found myself answering honestly, admitting that I too wondered what life might have looked like if I'd chosen differently. And when his eyes fell on the photo of my daughter, he spoke with a warmth I hadn't expected, telling me he admired how I balanced everything, though something unspoken lingered beneath his words, something that made the air thicken with emotions neither of us dared to voice. When he quietly admitted that my presence reminded him of the woman his wife used to be before, things fell apart. I felt the ache in his voice more than the words themselves, because I knew what it meant to watch something fade over time, to stay long after the love had dissolved into silence. As we shared fragments of our past year's unraveling marriage, my quiet separation, it felt as if the lines that had defined our roles for years blurred, leaving us simply as two people who understood each other in a way that was rare and unexpectedly intimate. His hand rested near mine on the desk, not touching, but the closeness created a fragile electricity in the quiet room. And when he said he just needed someone who understood, I told him he wasn't making anything awkward, that sometimes people just needed to feel seen. And he looked at me with an expression I had never seen on his face: soft, uncertain, grateful. That night, as I walked out into the shimmering city lights, something felt altered, as if a door inside me had opened without my permission. And even though we hadn't crossed any forbidden line, the emotional weight of what had passed between us settled into my thought and followed me home, tugging at me long after midnight. The next day, the smallest glance from him held a quiet recognition, a shared understanding, until he finally asked if we could talk again, and later, in the privacy of his office. He admitted that honesty had become hard for him, that he'd forgotten what it felt like not to pretend, and when he asked me what I was hiding, I found myself confessing that I was tired not of work, but of going unseen in my own life. When he whispered, "I see you," something deep inside me cracked open, gentle and unexpected. So when he asked if I'd join him for dinner, not as a date, but as two people trying to breathe for once outside, the rigid walls of routine I said yes, even though my heart trembled with worry and hope all at once. The dinner was quiet, soft, full of reflections about life and loneliness and the parts of ourselves we bury just to survive. And when his hand met mine on the table, it wasn't desire, but recognition. Two people holding on to the rare comfort of being understood. But by Monday he stood in his office looking torn and told me he valued me too much to blur the lines, that he'd rather have my respect than my regret. And though the words stung gently, they also felt right, steady, the kind of honesty that holds more care than any impulsive confession could. We kept working together after that, sharing brief glances full of unspoken warmth, never crossing that fragile threshold again, yet never forgetting the night we almost did. Months later, when I found his simple handwritten note thanking me for reminding him how to care again, I realized that some connections are meant to become great romances. They meant to wake us up, to remind us we're still alive, still capable of feeling deeply. And as I stood once more by the office door that had started everything, I understood that the most meaningful moments aren't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes they're quiet, gentle, and powerful enough to change the direction of your life without ever needing to become anything more.